5 Live.
Across the UK.
This is BBC 5 Live with Anna Foster.
Morning, it's 24 minutes to 11 now on 5 Live. Next month will mark a year since 19-year-old Gaia Pope went missing. Her body was found 11 days later on a cliff top in Dorset, not far from where she lived. And Gaia's family alleged that Dorset Police's failure to investigate a rape claim made by Gaia 2 years prior to her death severely affected her mental health. The police watchdog is now investigating the force's response to both Gaia's rape claim and to her disappearance. The family's campaign is called Justice for Gaia. Clara Pope Sutherland is her sister. Marienna Pope Vederman is Gaia's cousin. And solicitor Harriett Wistrich is with us as well, who's representing the family. Good morning, all three.
Good morning. Thanks, Anna, for having us.
No, thank you for joining us. And I'm really conscious, as I said there, that next month marks a year since she went missing. And you must feel, Clara, at this stage that you still have so few answers to important questions.
Yeah, we really don't have many answers at all. The last kind of solid thing that we got was back in February, which was her cause of death. So that obviously leaves a lot to even, like, that follows with some questions, why, how, etc. And we have really no peace as yet. So yeah.
Let's talk about Gaia as she was, because there is more to her than the way that she died. And
yeah.
Let's remember her and the kind of person that she was, because she wasn't just your sister. She was incredibly special to you. She loved art and nature and all of these things.
Yeah, she was amazing. She was such a bright, passionate, bubbly person. You could hear her laugh from a mile away. She lit up a room always. It was never, she was never quiet and kind of, she was always just the bright, positive person in the room. And I don't know, she loved art. She was a fantastic artist. Yeah.
Because one of the ways that you've been remembering her, and I know this has been really important to the whole family, Marienna, is through art and people actually contributing their own.
Yeah, absolutely. A few weeks ago, we launched a project called Art for Gaia. We're encouraging members of the public, people who are aware of the story, people who perhaps helped in the search, but anybody really who knew her or who didn't, or perhaps was touched by some of the issues that Gaia herself faced around mental health, around sexual violence, to create a forum really for people to express that. This past year, as Clara said, since February, when we learned that she died of hypothermia, we've learned almost nothing else. And partly, I guess, it's trying to find a way, as long as this process takes, and we're in it for the long haul, to get to the truth and to get justice for Gaia, is to invite some beauty back into our lives. And as you said, exactly, to encourage people and our community to remember her, not just for the ways that she was let down and the way that she left the world, but the way that she walked within it, which was extraordinary.
And it's important to remember. And she was clearly, Clara, an incredibly special young woman. And things changed for her when she first reported the rape. When did you first know about this? Was it a conversation that she ever had?
She never had the conversation with me or with the family. It only came out a year after it happened. She struggled very, very much with the information she was learning herself, because it was not a conscious sexual assault.
Memories started coming back to her, didn't they?
So she started kind of recalling things, and they kind of slowly dribbled through until it became too much of her and she had a mental health breakdown, at which point the family learned what had truly happened. And even then, it took a good few months up until she went missing, she was still recalling details that she hadn't really learnt herself before, which obviously brought her to what happened. So, it was never a conversation that she was able to speak about. It was so damaging to her mental health that she was not able to talk about it, and she didn't really know what was happening herself until the memories started flooding back.
And Harriett, what do we know legally about the report and what the police actually did about it? Do we have a great deal of detail on that or not?
Well, this is why the family have wanted this to be investigated, because they know that the police didn't follow all the investigative leads that they should have done. They know that they didn't refer the matter to the CPS for advice about charging. They know that the suspect, who Gaia accused, is somebody who had been arrested and convicted of other offences and is believed to be a serious sexual offender, multiple serial rapist. And they know that this was something that was also very much playing on Gaia's mind when she was told that they weren't going to charge him in relation to the rape of her. I think it was a heavy burden on her, as I understand. This is something that many women experience. They internalise a lot of the blame. And that's why it's important that this investigation can lead to changes in policing, because it has a much wider impact. It's impacted terribly on, in this family's case, the family feel it's a direct link, I believe, between what happened and the failures in the criminal justice process that ultimately led to her death. And it's something we know much more broadly, that particularly where there is an interaction with mental health problems, and of course very traumatic rapes can cause or exacerbate serious mental health problems. And that's why I think the family are very keen in joining with women's organisations and others in pushing for real changes in the way that the criminal justice system approach the investigation and prosecution of rape.
Dorset Police referred themselves to the Independent Office for Police Conduct, and they are now conducting an independent investigation of their own into several things, but into the force's response to the rape allegation that Gaia made. When she knew that wasn't going to be taken any further, Clara, what impact did that have on her?
It really had a serious impact, actually. We appealed at least twice, as far as I'm aware, or not in a process, but we were told that we were going to appeal. We wanted to appeal.
In fact, the only reason why that didn't happen is because the advice from the police at the time was, you can appeal. I was there in the meeting on the day that this was discussed. You can appeal, but you're not going to be successful. It's going to be pointless. And, even if you are successful and you end up in court, you're going to have a very traumatic time in court. You're going to be cross-examined. They're going to say all kinds of terrible things about you. And,
there was very little support of her.
They frightened her out of appealing, basically.
How did you feel about that, Marienna? Did you feel that they were trying to prepare her for what would doubtless be a difficult ordeal ahead, or did you feel personally that they were taking the easy route out?
It was very difficult at the time. I mean, I think it's, what they were saying was probably true. I don't think it would be responsible to allow a survivor of sexual violence to go through a prosecution process without knowing what it's going to be like. And regrettably, unfortunately, and as Harriett said, the experience of countless women speaks to this. It is like that. That being said, it's only one side of the story, and the other side of the story, we're behind you. We'll get you support. You have a right to speak. Your voice matters. What you've been through matters. That was absent. And, as a family, the position that put us in was having the sense that, that support really wouldn't be there. We would be on our own. Gaia's mental health was very fragile at that time.
Yeah. And for Gaia, that was the exact same thing.
Yeah, and we all spoke with her, Clara and I, and her sister Maya afterwards. And, we said, it's your decision. If you want to appeal, we support you, but there's no pressure. And she ultimately decided that at that time she wasn't strong enough. I think that she hoped that one day, she would recover and she would speak out. Obviously, that is not how things turned out, but that's why we're here speaking for her.
It's so awful that, the number of conversations that we had and the fear that was installed within her, not only, from the police and saying that the appeal wouldn't be good for her, but the fear that ultimately occurred as a result of the offence that the assaulter was arrested on. His release from prison, that fear, it was so much worse for her as a result. And it's one of those things where it's so important to provide women and girls like my sister that kind of support. And it's so wrong that police will sit in a room and talk them out of it on what basis, when actually it will end up, or it could end up how it ended for my sister. And that's just the worst possible thing.
And it's actually wrong what the police said. They should never, this is one of the planks of the complaint, but they should never have told her there's no point in pursuing a victim's right of review. We have a process, and that process is there for a reason. If there's no point in doing it, and we do know that victims' rights of review are not often successful, but if it's no point, then there's something wrong with the procedures and the process. But I think the kind of key point that the family are saying, it's true, unfortunately, that rape investigations and prosecutions can be a traumatic process, and insofar as they have to be, and I think there are a lot of things that could be done to change that, but insofar as they are that way, victims need all the support they can and the backing they can. And for Gaia, even at the end of the day, if there had been no conviction, if she had felt fully supported by the criminal justice agencies, that could have made a difference. So it's very important that there is that backing and support provided.
And you were saying there, Clara and Marienna, you felt that when she learned the news that the man that she had accused, who, as you said, was already in prison for a different crime, was going to be released, that had a real impact on her.
Such an impact. We were actually on holiday, our first family holiday in a very, very long time, when we found out the news, and she was silent, completely silent. She couldn't really speak about it. She didn't want to speak about it. But I don't know. It was when we found out that he was going to prison and when he was going to be released, and that it just kind of played on her mind.
It turned her entire life into a ticking time bomb, essentially. Yeah. She was threatened. Our family was threatened, and that's a big part of the reason why she kept her silence. And she was forced to live her life in fear of this unknown date, because of course, they don't tell you when it's going to happen, but we know that on average, serving a sentence for a sexual offence like that, most likely to serve half of what he was sentenced to. So, she had a rough idea of when it was going to happen, but complete ambiguity and no support outside of her family and her close friends. And I think that's really worth highlighting as well. There's such a huge crossover between mental health and sexual violence. Almost half of women who experience severe mental distress are survivors of sexual violence. And yet, taking our Gaia's case as a perfect example, she received, I think, something like 6 to 8 counselling sessions, crisis counselling, and then that was it. There was no more support from, we speak a lot in the abstract about the crisis in youth mental health services. We know that that's a national problem. You don't know really what that means until it's your family that's being torn apart and set on fire by it.
Yeah. And as we said at the start, once she went missing, you had this 11-day wait during which you desperately hoped that she would be out there somewhere, that she would be okay. And I can't even begin to imagine what it must have been like for you through that time, just hoping that she was still out there and would come home.
We have never, ever experienced such inner turmoil. It's 11 days of pressure and heaviness on everybody's chests, and feeling that, but trying to support each other, and also just desperately trying to find her. And it was so difficult because so difficult, but also it was almost a beautiful thing in a way, because we brought the community together, and we had one of the, I think Dorset Police said, one of the largest public search, organised public searches that they'd ever seen, or the country had ever seen.
It was incredible.
It was such an amazing experience in that regard, but I think it was for us as well such pressure on my chest. I'd never experienced anything like that in my life, and I'm just so grateful to everybody that came together at that time, because I don't think I could have coped without it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It kept us alive. It's no exaggeration to say that, the local community was incredible, but also, when we found her, we talk about the Justice for Gaia community, and I think often people think of it as local, but people were lighting candles for her in China. And what was going on with the local community, that public search, it was so big because we did develop serious reservations and frustrations as a family during that time, in terms of how the police were treating us, how they seemed to be treating, the Gaia's disappearance. And, Clara and I mean, we didn't stop for more than 20 minutes in those 11 days, because, when it's an impossible feeling to describe, but when it's one of yours, you don't eat, you don't sleep until it's over.
Yeah. But it's just, I don't know. Sorry, I started
No. Well, it's clearly so difficult to talk about, and that's what strikes me, is that the reason you want to talk about it, and the reason you want to do this and put yourself through this, is that Gaia's voice isn't gone.
No,
you speak for her.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. I think everybody, myself, my sister Maya, Marienna, my mum, my dad, everybody, we're living for Gaia now, in a way. And I just can't bear the thought of this ever happening to anybody else.
Yeah.
And if, and I just want to throw it out there that if anybody needs any support for anything like this, please, if you need to, reach out, because I couldn't bear the thought of anything happening to you either. Sorry.
No,
it's okay.
No, thank you. Look, you've done the most wonderful job, and you've spoken so beautifully and so elegantly, and I'm sure Gaia would be incredibly proud at what you do in her name. So thank you.
I hope so. Fighting on for her.
You are. Thank you, all three of you. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
If anybody wanted to get in touch, by the way, just before we finish off, or if anybody's interested in sending something in or learning more about the Art for Gaia project, you can search Justice for Gaia on social media. We also have a website, which is justiceforgaia.com.
Thank you. Thank you, Marienna. Thank you, Clara. Marienna Pope Weideman, who's Gaia's cousin, Clara Pope Sutherland, who's Gaia's sister, and Harriett Wistrich, the solicitor, who is representing the family as well. And the family's campaign, as we said, is called Justice for Gaia, and you can have a look online and find out much more about that as well. It's 5 to 11 now on the programme. News and